now.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to F64 Lunch Bunch. We're going to have some fun today. Well, actually, we've had fun on all of these. If you are in the attendee list now, do me a favor and just put the word out on your own social media line that just says, hey, it's getting started. We've got the king and queen, or the empress and emperor of lighting, Bobbi Lane and Tony Corbell. And also joining us, I don't know how your screen is set up, but on mine, I've got Steve Brazel underneath me and Don Komarechka, bottom corner, and Shamara Young. And that's the group today. And if you think about what's happening right now, in fact, Bobbi and I were talking before we got started, because nobody knows what the future looks like, but we do know downtime, and we do know how many photographers regularly will introduce themselves as a natural light specialist. And we all know that every time we hear that, that means that it's somebody that's afraid of studio lighting. And we really wanted to get into it a little bit. We've got two people that absolutely love this stuff with a passion. I have hung out with both of them. I'm a better photographer, if I'm allowed to even call myself one, because of the two of them. The difference is that it would take me 10 hours to light a portrait, and it would be just as good, but it would take Bobbi and Tony 10 to 15 minutes or less and know what they were doing. In fact, Bobbi helped me with my lighting today before we got started. So I want to kind of kick this off with just one great simple question of thoughts you guys have on things people can be doing during the downtime to fine-tune their lighting.
Well,
everybody jump in at once.
I don't think that we ever have the
of my master.
Yeah, I don't think we ever have the luxury of time to practice. You know, I remember years ago being asked by a mutual friend, Judy Holmes, hey, you want to go practice with our wide angle lenses this weekend? I'm like, practice? I'm a 30, 40-year veteran. I don't need to practice. And yet we do need to practice, and we do need to test, and we need to try new things. And I don't think we've ever had, very often in our careers, we've never had the opportunity or the time to stop and put everything on hold and go in the studio and sit down and really work out some ideas and some new techniques and try some things that you've not always done.
And make mistakes too, right, Tony?
Yeah.
Because
Well,
you don't want to be making mistakes when you've got a live audience that's going to be heckling you.
Well, that's one of the things that I always talk about in my workshops. You can't practice in front of your clients.
Yeah.
You know, that's not fair. And everybody plus wants to always increase their pricing. They want to make more money per shoot. But you can't ask for more money and practice on your clients. It's not fair. So now's the time to work on your craft, I think. Bobbi, what do you think about that?
Well, you know, you just brought up a point that I think is really important about, you know, I have never gone out and done a job without being prepared, in terms of going out and making sure that I've tried out what my lighting is going to be, making sure that everything is going to work. So even if you're shooting for yourself, why wouldn't you do the same thing? Why wouldn't you practice when you say, hey, I have an idea about what I want to do, even if I want to do a series on flowers? Why wouldn't I practice that just to find out what works and what doesn't work? And what Don just said, I tell my students this all the time, the best way to learn is to fall flat on your face. Because if you fall flat on your face, you have to figure out what went wrong and what you can do to make it better. If you just go out and shoot something and it looks great, do you know why? And then the question is always, is it repeatable? So you just did that looks great, but do you know what you did so you could come back and do it again? So now is really the time to like self-assign and challenge yourself. There's so much stuff that's available right now online. Everybody's doing, you know, webinars and webcasts and all kinds of stuff. And there's no reason to not participate or partake, I should say, in all of this, and then go do your own practicing, because that's where it's going to come from.
And that's really, experimentation is the other thing. I mean, really, practice time is the time for you to try the thing that you've wanted to try, or you think you could get better at, or you're not sure you're doing it right, and experiment with solutions to those things, so that when you go out and you've got 5 minutes to shoot a portrait, and you don't have time for whatever reason to set up your lights and get a for lack of a better phrase, a dummy in front of you to photograph, you know what you're doing before you actually are doing a job where somebody's expecting a return on their investment.
You know, I'm sure that Tony and I both have lots of stories from our career, but I'm not going to go into a story right now. But one of the things, because I shoot a lot on location, and that could be I'm doing a studio setup at somebody else's place. Like if I'm doing something for business clients and I'm basically bringing a studio with me. But as a studio, excuse me, as a location photographer, I have to plan that everything that can go wrong will go wrong and have contingency plans. And then I have to have contingency plans for the contingency plans because it's never going to stop at just one layer. I mean, I have had, like, I've gone through 4 layers one time at this shoot, and it came down to the fact that I couldn't do it because even though it was a cord back in the days before we had any kind of radio remotes, I had PC cords stuck in every possible place in my car, in my camera bag, in my lighting kit, in my accessory kit, and they were all gone. They were all gone because I had been working with a variety of assistants, and when we ever came back to the studio, everybody was putting stuff away in a different place. So,
and that's the one time that it failed and you needed it and you didn't have it.
Right.
Yeah. That same thing happened to me. 60 oil company executives from Shell Oil, and the one thing that failed was a sync cord, and I couldn't find a backup.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, mine was Robert Weiss, the film director, West Side Story, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Sound of Music, you know, all that. I was photographing Robert Weiss. I sent him flowers the next day, and then I went back and photographed him the next week.
Wow.
Would I be so bold as to offer an idea in terms of lighting? And again, everybody should be experimenting and coming up with new thoughts and new processes. But that's a hard thing to just say, okay, well, let me on my own in my isolation step outside of my comfort zone. It's kind of a hard barrier to cross, right? So something that I found useful, now I'm doing it with macro photography and other things, but is just make a list. Say if it's all about portrait lighting, maybe you write down a whole list of just keywords like mirror, snoot, green screen, etc. Things that you might have never used before, but they are part of your industry. Others use them. It's unfamiliar to you. Just take them all and kind of take a word out of a hat kind of idea. All right, today I'm going to try to do a makeshift green screen and see how I can subtract the green color from, if you've never done it before, who knows if you'll have a job coming up in the future that might require that and you don't want to stumble across it, right?
Well, you know what's hard is that you don't know what you don't know. So sometimes it's like what you just said. It's kind of hard to figure out. Well, it's like I don't know anything more than just this, so I can't conceive of it. So that's where Google comes in handy. Just, go in and do a search for portrait lighting or experimental lighting, or it's just, do a Google search and you'll start to find things that will trigger in you and go, oh, that looks really interesting.
Well, and the other thing is, speaking of Google searches, one thing that is a lost art, it used to be that you had to know how to do on any search engine back in the day, Boolean searches and how to do complex searches. And now Google has an advanced search page. If you're looking for something, if you're looking for a particular technique on lighting or whatever, use the advanced search to detail that search down and get your results quicker too.
I'd be curious to hear about any projects, and this is for both of you, Bobbi and Tony, any lighting projects you're doing right now at home to kind of stay creative. As skilled as you both are, I'm sure you're still keeping your skills sharp. Any ideas?
You want to go first, Tony?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I think we both are working on things. I came up with a concept. Thanks for the question, Shmar. I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
I came up with a concept. I was thinking about this. Our little community here has a really, really well-respected community theater, a little community theater. And my wife, Mandy, and I went to a show right before we all got locked down. And it was Murder on the Orient. And they've got 4 shows a year, and they're fabulous shows. Great costuming department, fabulous props, great direction, great actors. And I'm stewing about something. I need a project. I need a fine art project. I need something for me. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I think I stumbled into it. And that is, I've talked to the director since we've been locked down about me going in and photographing 25 of their top actors or their favorite actors. They can help. They can do the picking. I don't want to pick, but 25 of the actors in costume, and I want to bring them into the studio. I'm going to shoot them in black and white with film, probably. But I want to do an old school, really, really well lit portrait shoot with each of them. Working with the technology of today's new lighting setups with the B10s, which Bobbi and I both have a passion for the ProPhoto B10s.
Oh, yeah.
I can go anywhere and I can shoot this stuff so fast without ever having to pull out an extension cord and work all day. So anyway, we're real excited about that happening. And as soon as we can get everybody back into the theater, I'm going to start shooting. And I've already got the blessing of the theater to do this thing. So I'll start working with the costumers, and we're going to do these great it's basically lighting projects for me. So
Are you going to do this in the studio or in the theater and use the theater lights?
no, I'm not going to use theater lights. I'm going to bring them into the studio and do them.
Yeah.
And my studio is 4 blocks away from the theater.
Yeah.
So it's easy for people to come over to my studio. So, and I just want everything to match, and it's going to be an old school kind of a funky look, I think.
Cool.
Very cool.
I have an idea that I'm kind of tossing this around. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to present it yet, but some of the camera stores are like trying to get people to put up some classes, and I've already talked to Skip about this. I mean, I am working on some interactive classes where you get a lesson, an assignment, and a critique. It's like 4 weeks long. I don't want to go too much into it yet because I don't really have them completely. They're not completed yet, but I want to do stuff that's interactive. But in the meantime, I was thinking about, people know me mainly as a portrait photographer. So, and that is mostly what I do, although I've shot absolutely everything, including like cars and vans and buses and 6,000 square foot studios to Mattel toys and micro lights, So I've done a whole variety of stuff, but nowadays it's like, how can you be teaching portraiture when you don't have anybody to photograph? As Tony said, it's until he can get these people. So I started thinking about, well, who have I got to photograph but Lee, my husband? And that started me off thinking about this. It's like, this is where pulling up out of yourself, out of your creativity, because I'm a great believer that you can make a fantastic photograph in a 10 by 10 foot area and be unlimited in what you can do in that area. So how many different ways can I photograph Lee? It's like I can light him. I can light him with the portable flash. I can light him bouncing. I can light him with grid spots. I can light him using modifiers. I can light him using window light. I can do natural light. I can do serious things. I can do funny things. I can do him sleeping. I can do, there's like, I started thinking and I already came up with like 30 ideas of how many ways I can show a portrait, how I can make a portrait of Lee. Because, this is another thing, Tony and I always talk about this. It's like, you can't take one picture of somebody that tells you everything there is to know about that person.
Right.
You can only decide, this is what I'm doing for this picture. This is how I'm going to portray them.
Yeah.
So why not do that exploration? If you only have one person to photograph, well, then explore. So I just started it, but I've got a list, I've got as Don was saying this, I have my list, my yellow legal pad. I've got my list of ideas that's already going down there.
The selfie generation is screaming vindication right now.
Well, Bob Coates just said, poor Lee. And for those of you that want to order it, we'll have a link here for the 2020 or 2021 Lee Veras calendar.
With
12 shots. And there's also a new novel coming out, or a movie called The Book of Lee. What else could we go with this?
If he could just hold some Pirelli tires, and be on that calendar.
That works. That works. We'll also do the shirtless firehouse pose.
That's right.
We do the firemen. We'll cover them all. Hey, just want to remind all our attendees, the Q&A is open there for you guys. If you've got any questions for Bobbi and Lee, fire away.
That's Tony.
And actually, Fred commented in there.
Oh, I saw Bobbi and Lee. All right. How about Bobbi and Tony? Sorry. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Steve.
No, Fred mentioned in there that he's been thinking about doing a quote, how did I get that shot quote using one of his photos and discussing how it came about and how it was, created. Remind you of anything, Skip?
Gee whiz. There's this series on, where is it? On YouTube, I think. You know the guy.
Well, it's in my blog,
but
behindtheshot.tv.
Yes.
That's basically what my podcast is, and it's also what your series Why is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the concept.
I love the transparency with that idea too, because you have, whenever I post something online, I give a bit of science, I get a bit of background, the techniques, and as much as I possibly can about how the image was taken, because, right now, you can learn everything about photography from masters and from online resources, and there's no hidden secrets anymore. It's not like it was many decades in the past. And so if you go out there and share all of your techniques and secrets with the world, it doesn't hurt your income. In fact, it adds more value to your work when people realize exactly how much effort went into it. And it's an entirely different paradigm to think about it that way. But by sharing all of those secrets and the tricks and everything else, nobody who's just coming in off the street is going to say, oh, wow, you must have a nice camera anymore, because that thought is so far down below everything else that you've just described above that. You've established yourself as a professional. And that only comes by telling everybody what you're doing and knowing full well that nobody is going to walk down that exact same road unless they themselves are a professional photographer, probably somewhere else in this global village, and not cannibalizing your own sales.
Well, and let me add to that. And that is, I've actually had, first of all, I had somebody once on my show say, oh, like I have a copyright on my f-stop. You don't. But I've actually, when Don was on my show and somebody chimed in on a YouTube comment that, oh, this sweat bee looks fake, there's no way it was walking that way. Don went on to YouTube in the comments, put a link to his raw files, described exactly what he did, and in Dropbox or whatever, put a series of shots so people could see how it was done.
The entire image sequence in the numbered order of like 200, 300 shots from that day. And some of them were dark frames because the flash didn't fire because it couldn't recycle fast enough. And they were all included. And you want to call me out as being a fake, that's fine, but you better be prepared to back that up when I show you everything that's been done about the process.
And that's where stuff like Tony and Bobbi do with education and sharing the knowledge, I think, really in this industry matters. We've got people out there like you two that are willing to share, a lifetime of experience.
I think we've both experienced that moment where someone, where you've thrown out the question. I mean, years ago at the Javits Center at one of the conferences, I said to a guy, I said, I saw what you did on this poster for one of the shows in town. And I said, it was fabulous. I said, I'm curious about how you got the chair, the way he had floated the chair. I said, I'm curious about how you pulled that off. He said, I couldn't tell you that. That's one of my trade secrets. And I went, excuse me? And he said, yeah, that's one of my secrets. I can't tell you that. And I said, okay. Well, I said, I can think of 5 ways of doing it. I just wondered which one you picked, and walked away from. Don't tell me you've got a secret.
Right.
Yeah. Unless you're Penn and Teller.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and even then, you can find it at the Magic Castle Library. So even then,
So, the thing is that we, Tony and I teach a lot of technique. You got to learn how to do something in order to get that idea across. But, I can teach somebody exactly how I did this, and they're not going to do it exactly the same. You can't imitate me because you're not me. I can't imitate you. It's like
you could try to recreate a picture, and you can't recreate the picture the same way.
Yeah.
No, in fact, I always use, from a music photography point of view, I always use the point of view that there can be 70 people in a photo pit photographing the same band, and a huge amount of us are in the same spot because we can't move. And not one of us gets literally the same shot as everybody else.
Right.
We have a different eye. We have a different, idea of exposure. We have a different idea of composition. And, again, I always think back, Don said to me also one time, he said, because I said to him, you share everything so freely. Are you worried about that? And his comment was, if they learn what I know now, they're already behind.
Yeah.
It's true.
I'm 10 steps ahead.
It's true.
I mean, yeah, you can follow behind me, but I'm going to have more momentum than you.
Yeah.
Well, when you talk about lighting, when Tony made that comment before about, he said to the guy, I can think of 5 ways, which one did you use? I can't help but think of a 30-second Dean Collins story where Dean was asked by somebody in the audience, of course your images are beautiful. You're photographing nothing but gorgeous models. Don't you photograph any ugly people? And he said, well, sir, I'm about to do that now. Why don't you come up here with your family? So am I right? Did I get it right?
You got it right.
That was the story.
The way he worded it was when the guy says, don't you ever photograph anybody ugly? And Dean said, sure, come on down. And then he said, in fact, bring your whole family.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, Dean is also the one that said beauty is in the eyes of the checkbook holder. So for those of you that get into arguments in Facebook forums because somebody doesn't like a particular image you shared, just remember beauty is in the eyes of the checkbook holder.
Right.
Hey, let's jump over to tips and ideas. I know both of you had a couple things you wanted to share on screen today. You want to jump into it now?
Yeah, you want to go first, Bobby? Go ahead and show.
Sure. Okay. I've got, Tony and I talked a little earlier when we're trying to think about trying to do our kind of like our greatest hits. And, you know, for those of you who know me, know that I have a terrible time like trying to narrow down anything. And like, how do I get my screen to get big here? Okay, hold on just one second.
Hit F.
Well, it's full screen here, just about.
Okay, there we go. How's that? Does that look okay?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly.
That lighting.
A lot of people don't know that I started off as a product photographer. And the first probably 10 years of my career was all large format product in the studio, no people at all. So I became, you know, it's like a real Virgo thing. It's like, you know, the anal retentive control freak, gotta have everything tiny perfect. And again, in those days, it was all on film. It was all on transparency. It was all in one shot. This has actually got several images that are put together. But actually, this is something that I did just a couple of years ago. So, you know, occasionally I still have some product photographer clients. And I find this absolutely challenging. It's graphic. It's beautiful. This is like parts that go into airplanes. It's like, it's kind of boring stuff, but you know, but with the lighting, you can do something that makes it interesting.
The lighting on this is just wonderful.
This is, in talking with Steve here, most of my friends are musicians. I'm now in Carver, Massachusetts, which is next to Plymouth. And Carver's the cranberry capital of the world, by the way, in case you didn't know that. But I grew up in Brockton, and since the time I was in junior high school, almost all of my friends are musicians. And now that I moved back here 9 years ago, a lot of those people are still here, and most of my world is musicians. So I started this. This is a project actually I did with ProPhoto a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, like 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. And photographing, and this is one of these things where I had this idea in my mind, and I'm thinking about all the musicians and thinking about music and how much I love this and what this means. So this was really a very complicated lighting design, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit. So obviously the musicians are where the music comes from. They're creating it, it's coming out of them, they're designing it, it's all coming from them. So in this case here, this is a very eclectic band. I don't even know how you could qualify them. And each one of them has a beauty dish on their face. And if you notice, their legs start to go off into silhouette as they go down. But on each instrument, there is a grid spot, because where does the music come from? The music is coming out of the middle of the instrument. So I wanted it against the white background. I wanted to keep just the grid spot on the center and have the outer edges of the instruments be dark so that you're showing off the shape, and then have the impact of the picture of the light on the people. So
it wasn't done. It wasn't done with just flash on camera, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, it was not. 2 lights on the background, 1 on each musician. So there's 5. The guitar on the left is 6. The upright bass is 7. The dobro on the right is 8. So there's 8 lights on this picture.
And she knows it's a dobro. Yes.
Yeah, I've been hanging out with musicians since I was 12.
You know, and this also, again, your lighting, just wow. This is what I hear constantly people complain is one of their most difficult things, and that is 2 of these guys are wearing white on a white background.
Right.
And your subject separation is spot on.
You know what's really funny is that as a product photographer, I have to tell you, this is so bizarre. I have to say 75% of my clients either wanted me to shoot white on white or black on black. And, you know, you had to learn how to do that.
Well, but that's a good question then. In a shot like this, where you have the guy on the left is kind of a Navajo white, and the guy on the right is, I mean, that suit he's wearing on the right is white.
Yeah.
Like it's actually whiter than the background.
Well, actually, and that was part of it, because if you notice, there's a little bit of fall off in the light as it goes up on the background. So I didn't want it to be high key perfect. I wanted to have that, it just like having this light go up. So it's just the palest amount of gray, so the white could pop out against that.
So what's your best single tip for people watching for shooting white on white, or for that matter, black on black? Yeah.
Shoot tethered and look at your histogram.
Okay.
Really, because otherwise you gotta, trying to find that balance is gonna be just right. All right, I'm gonna flip through a couple of these. Speaking of friends from a long time ago, this is my friend Amy that I've known since the first grade. She's a classical pianist, and she started playing with the Brockton Symphony Orchestra when she was 9 years old. So she was going to be doing a concert the next day, and this was during the rehearsal. Amy is also a personal trainer, and she competed as a bodybuilder for a while. Now, there's a couple of interesting things about this picture. She's the classical pianist. She's got the formal dress on. She's got the full grand piano here, but she's bench pressing an accordion. She picked up the accordion and started going out. A lot of our friends play out locally, and started going out, and she's classically trained. She reads music. My friends are playing music and they're jamming. She really didn't know how to jam, so she completely stepped out of her comfort zone. So that's why I had her. This was her new thing, right? She's. I mean, look at her arms, right? She's just like she's pressing this up. I love the lighting on this. The screen in the background, about having the shadow up there, and it looks like there's the special box. You open up the top of the box and it all glows inside. So the inside of the piano was glowing. So this was also a little complicated. It took a little while to get all this. You see there's an edge light on the left-hand side because I really wanted to emphasize her shape. Trying to get just the right glow in the piano. It's like trying to photograph a car because it's all reflective. And then trying to get the lights to be just in the right place so that I could get the shadows up on the background. So this was another one. This took a little while to put together, probably about 2 or 3 hours to get it really tweaked.
I love the background, the depth that you have. Just
Right.
It's not a static subject, right? Like the background adds so much additional depth. It's not just white on white or black on black. It's echoing what we see in front of it. And I think that's an art most people will just kind of pass over and not really comment on it. So I want to commend you for that.
Well, thank you very much. But part of this is that it's the understanding of the light and the shadow. Skip never gets this right, but my nickname is I'm the Mistress of Light, not the Empress. I'm the Mistress of Light, and Tony is the shadow chasing dude. So between the two of us, it's really all about the light and the shadow. And I always talk about the direction of the light, the quality of the light, and the depth of the light. The depth of the light is how dark the shadows are. And you have each one of those is controlled separately, and you have to pull them together to match the concept of your picture. You've got to have concept.
In her own way, she's kind of indicated that I'm on the dark side and she's on the lighter side. So
she was sliding that in there kind of subtly, though, which was nice.
I picked up on this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I have my homage to Tony coming up here pretty soon. I do a lot of, dragging the shutter, combining strobe and ambient light. I've known this girl since she was 15. It's very simple. There's a softbox strobe light on the right-hand side in a completely dark studio, and there's a pen light. And so somebody is standing behind her. The shutter's just staying open. Somebody is behind her, pointing the light back towards the camera and kind of outlining her and trying to get the skirt to light up a little bit, to be a little translucent. This is another one of those, and she's trying to hold still for that whole time. This is probably about an 8-second exposure. So the modeling light and the strobe is off. So this is a trial and error. You just got to try a million ones before you're going to get the one that's actually really going to work.
I love the sense of movement in this piece. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I love doing that. This is the balancing the light thing is something that I really totally enjoy. And that little video that Skip put up, it's all about that. This is another similar thing to that. This is with the B10s, and there's an LED light. This is actually at Unique Photo in New Jersey, and this is in their loading dock. So what you see, the horizontal lines that you see in the back, those are the sliding doors that open up so the trucks can unload. So I have an LED light with a red gel on the background, and I'm lighting her with a B10 and a strip light from camera right, and I'm zooming during the exposure. Exposure is probably about a 1/15 of a second long for the LED light to come in, and I'm zooming so that all of this weird stuff happens. It's again, it's like it's endless. As long as I've been doing this, I have yet to exhaust all the different ways that you can play with balancing light.
And you don't just do that once, right, Bobby? Because you
No.
can't get the exact
Oh,
same
yeah.
results multiple times in a row. As soon as you start zooming or adding a lengthier exposure to everything,
Yeah.
any image that you try to create, no matter how much skill you have, has an element of chaos that's uncontrollable.
And let me add on this really quick, because Lori W in the Q&A said, is chat disabled? Chat is disabled for attendees, but the Q&A is available. The reason I bring it up is because what she said was, let me say this is fab.
Thank you.
I agree.
This model is Oakley Boycott, and she is fab. She gets it. She's like, she really gets the whole visual thing. Okay, this is my homage to Tony. Here's my shadows. So here, this is just edge lighting. So there's 3 lights here. One is a strip light from camera right, one's a strip light from camera left that does just his head, and then there's a grid on a black background to just give a little bit of glow, and of course he's wearing black. And it's kind of breaking the rules because I've got him kind of going out of the edge of the frame, but I love the balance in this, and I love the kind of like drama and mystery of this.
Yeah,
I like
great.
the way you lit this, like you say, and he's camera right, looking camera right.
Yeah.
Or frame right, looking frame right. But I love the fact that the look on his face ties into that. You're kind of wondering what he's left behind with his.
Well, and you were able to pull it off because of the right arm leading you up.
Yes.
So if the arm hadn't been extended, it wouldn't have worked, but it does work.
So for those people in the chat that don't know Squaresoft Box from Octabox from Stripbox, why did you choose, not saying that it's not me, by the way, why did you choose strip boxes left and right instead of, a 24-inch softbox or something else?
That's an excellent question, because I didn't want the light to come and wrap around. I just wanted to have the edges of it. I wanted it to be soft, so I didn't want it to be a grid, but I just wanted the edges. And of course, the larger the light source, the more coverage you're going to get. So this is, both of these are off to the side. I have to tell you that in this picture was a pure serendipity. He was sitting down, and he stood up to take a break. And when he stood up, he went towards the light to get out of his chair. And I went, wait, come back, you gotta come back. And then I did that, but it's that feeling of the motion, like he's in the process of doing something. And I actually did 2 frames on this, and all I did was change the position of his nose so that I would be able to get that light in his eye. And that was it. So it was just 2 shots, and this was the one. This is one of my favorite pictures from 2019.
You should be proud.
Okay. This is, I kind of want to talk about this because people think you need to have all kinds of fancy equipment. And this is actually 3 portable flashes, and each one has a grid spot. This was an idea that I had. It was actually a webinar that I did for the MAC group and with Joe Brady. And it was about photographing high school seniors. And I was brainstorming with my assistant, Matt Burdick, who's been working with me for a long time. And we were talking about, a high school senior. Okay, so what's cool? Well, I'm a birder. I'm a bird watcher, and I find feathers all over the place. And I went, feathers are cool. And that got me thinking, and I dreamt this picture. What happens to high school seniors? They leave the nest. They break out of the egg. They learn to spread their wings, and they learn to fly. So I keep talking to everybody about this. You got to have the concept before you have the technique. Technique is not going to make a picture. The concept's going to make the picture. So I had her close her eyes because I wanted this to be more universal. I didn't want this particular picture to be about her as it is about the idea. So that's why there's no eye contact. And it's almost like she's in a dream. So there's a grid spot on her face. There's a grid spot that's on the nest with the egg. And there's a grid spot on the feathers that are just hung by monofilaments. And the way that her hair is flying is we have a piece of foam core board that we're doing this. So, pretty simple. It actually wasn't that hard to do because I was so clear about what it is that I wanted to look at. Okay, and I wanted to show you that I can do high key too. So I had to give you a high key picture with a beautiful girl. And you know what? When you have somebody that's this beautiful, it's really hard to not take a beautiful picture. But there is really nice lighting on this as well. So I'm gonna move on because I don't want to take up too much time. These next couple of shots, I'm gonna show you all of them and then I'm gonna come back again. This is the George Hurrell lighting. And the great Hollywood portraitist George Hurrell shot in my studio in Los Angeles from 1980 until 1992 and his death. And Lee and I teach a Hollywood glamour Hurrell style lighting, and we do it at a variety of places. One of the pictures that George did in my studio was of Alexander Godunov, the ballet dancer. And this is a direct imitation of the Alexander Godunov picture, except using a girl. And, you know, she was blonde, he was blonde, the look on the face. And one of the things that we talk about, George used all, you know, big Mole Richardson focusing Fresnels. And this is actually done with strobes. So you can use your strobes to make them look very similar. So this is a grid spot with a little diffusion over the front of it as the main light. And then there's a grid spot on her hair light. And that's it. It's just 2 lights, but it's all about the posing, the attitude, about pulling it all together and being really exacting. George shot 8 by 10, so there wasn't anything quick happening with him. So you really have to take your time. I don't want to take too much time.
Real quick though, Pamela McCormick asked, and I'm not sure which shot she was asking about it. It might have been this one. It might have been the one before, but she asked, how close to the subject do you have the lights placed?
That depends upon the light. There's a general rule. It's about the size of the light source and the distance away. The general rule is the size of your light should be about the same size as your subject and should be about the same distance away. So if you're doing a headshot, that's this much, so your light should be this big and it should be that far away. But that's not true of a grid spot, because a grid spot's only 7 inches and you wouldn't put a grid spot 7 inches away. Same thing with like a beauty dish. You're not going to put a beauty dish, you know, 14 inches away or 20 inches away.
Right,
so,
right.
you know, it kind of depends, you know, and that's my favorite saying in photography. Everything depends upon everything.
Bobbi, just take another question while we're off base just a little bit. Fred had asked, was the musician shot in the beginning done at EP Levine's?
Yes.
Or Levine's? Okay, there you go, Fred.
Levine's, no, Levine's. Yeah, that was done at Levine's. Yeah. This is a takeoff on the Norma Shearer picture that George did. But in this case, I'm showing you this. It's very simple. It's a beauty dish. And then there's just one light in the background that's shining through something to make a very subtle shadow. And then Lee, my fabulous husband, who was a genius at post-processing, he did a duotone on this in Lightroom and took the clarity slider and took it down a little bit so it would have a little bit of that glow. So part of this is the lighting and part of this is the post-processing.
I'm going to ask the same question I did on the grids and on the strip boxes, and that is, why would you choose a beauty dish here?
The beauty dish, it doesn't, you know, an umbrella will spread out at 120 degrees. A softbox spreads out at about 50 degrees. A beauty dish spreads out at about 60, 65 degrees. So it has a little bit more coverage than a softbox does, but it also has, and this is a very technical term, the beauty dish has a little more oomph.
That's exactly the way I describe it as well.
A little oomph. Okay.
A little more, yeah. It's got a little more contrast to it. The softbox has got a little more softness. This has just got a little more bite to it.
Gotcha.
And it keeps it a little bit more with the Fresnels. This is a takeoff on the Diana Ross shot. He shot Diana Ross in my studio. She was the biggest bitch I ever saw in my life. I came this close to throwing her out of the studio because she was so mean. However, George did these amazing, amazing photographs of her. And this was actually done, I went to Prague last November with the Fuji team from over there, and we did a Hurrell lighting workshop, and this was done in the workshop. So there is these are all Fresnels, by the way. These are focusing Fresnel. So there's a Fresnel on her face. There's a Fresnel on her hip, the hip light. There's a Fresnel behind her head, and there's another one lower. So it was all about where is the light, where is you know, George was really great at the chiaroscuro, you know, the light against the dark. And so it was all about very carefully placing that. So you have the light against the dark against the light to be able to show off the form. Okay, I shoot people besides models. I don't actually shoot models for a living. I shoot people, regular people, real people. I call them real people. This is Ethiopia. This is a portable flash in a 20 by 20 inch softbox off to camera left and just balancing the light. The boys were standing off to the side and I asked them to come in and I shot again like 5 frames. That was it. I mean, it just like really simple, but it's again the whole idea about this is the chieftain, that's the Karo River behind them in the Omo River Valley. I'm sorry, it's the Omo River behind them, but this is the Karo chief. So just very, very simple. This is the real people. I do this a lot. You know, I'll go to a lot of conventions or events that are going on and with Fuji and with Profoto, and I will set up a little studio and anybody who wants a headshot can get one. So people just come and we make a print for them and give them the print. And this was actually at Hunt's in Melrose, Mass. I think about a year ago. And this little girl, I completely fell in love with her. I mean, this girl has like so much presence. So this isn't really anything fancy about lighting. It's 2 lights. There is a 24 or a 20 inch octa on her. These are the B2s. And there's a grid spot in the background. It's really more about working with your subject and helping them feel relaxed to be able to give you something else. All right, I know I'm taking up a lot of time. I have 2 more shots. This is in Venice in February.
Wow.
This is Mona Rose. The Rose sisters they're the costumers there. They come back year after year after year. And some people spend thousands, up to $10,000 on their costumes every year. This is Mona Rose. She's one of 3 sisters. She designs and makes the costumes for her and her sister every year. And this year, their theme was Bali Baroque. Like there's an Indian theme, but it still is Baroque because of the Venice Carnival. And they wanted to shoot in the fish market at Rialto. So they're underneath the fish market and they're lit with, she's lit with a B10 and a 20 inch octa. I might have a bigger one. Off to camera right, and then there is an A1X behind her, which I originally had directly behind her just to light up her shawl. But when I moved a little bit, I realized that I could get the starburst from seeing that flash in the picture. And then I'm zooming during the exposure so that
There we go.
She doesn't have any natural light on her. She is all lit just by the strobes. But underneath the overhang on the outside, so that's all, again, 15th of a second exposure and zooming the background.
Wonderful.
So this is, and I totally love these people. They're just like amazing. I'm so privileged that they are willing to work with us. They are very, very particular about who they will work with. So they work with me in my travel group. This is I've photographed her for 4 years, but this is the 2nd time that we've had a private session with her and her sisters. All right, and one more. And Tony, I know we are in a total agreement on this. Learning how to use light, learning how to create with light makes you a better natural light photographer. Because when you learn how to control light, you learn how to see it. You get a much better idea about what the direction, the quality, and the depth is doing. So when you go back out into the real world, you see light in a completely different way. And personally, I think I'm a really fantastic natural light photographer. And the reason for that is because I have so much lighting experience. So this last picture, I call this the Golden Woman. This is also at Venice. It's early morning light. She's backlit. She's underneath the overhang that's opposite the Doge's Palace. And to camera left of her, there are columns. So she's wearing a gold mask, and you see how smooth that is and how much light there is on her face, because the light is coming from behind her. As you can see, all of her fur is all lit up, and it's hitting the column and then bouncing back into her face. So I had photographed her. There's always a bunch of people around. I'd photographed her with another group of people, and then she moved, and then I came back and I did something else, and then I started to see something really happening. And this is also about working it. So after she finished with the 2nd group of people, I showed her some of the images that I had done and asked her if she would come with me, because I could see this then. And so I got her in this place, and with the lights lining up, going up out of her back, and the little tiny lights in the ceiling and the backlighting and all of that. I mean, it's just I saw it, I found the light and put her in the light. And she also makes her own costumes, and it's just fantastic. So that's, I'll shut up now.
Well, Bob, but there was two things I wanted to touch on. The man that was getting out of the frame to the right, and the photo just prior to this one where you had the light in a place where you didn't intend. Those were both wonderful kind of happy accident moments that, as a professional that knows their craft really well, still has an aha. I didn't think of that until it just comes in front of me,
and can execute it.
And you can execute it because you recognize it and you think, okay, that wasn't what I planned per se, but I can really use this. And let's just take this as an opportunity to explore something that wasn't, pre-visualized in my mind to begin with. And that's very powerful.
There's two things I want to say to that. One is my favorite quote. Louis Pasteur said, "Chance favors the prepared mind." So being so prepared on this gave me the opportunity so that when I did find something, I knew how to take advantage of it.
Well
so that's
said.
one thing. And the other thing is that don't stop when your picture is just good enough. Keep working, keep pushing, keep trying to go another step so that you can see what else you can do. How much further can you take it? Is there some other
either on this image or the one just after it? David asks, what's the exposure time on this?
Well, this one is a 15th of a second. Almost all of my drag to shutter is either at an 1/8 or a 15th of a second. Over the years, I've found that a 30th of a second isn't enough time to drag, or if you're doing movement, and a 1/4 of a second can be too much. This is a combination of all kinds of things, but it's either an 1/8 or a 15th of a second.
And
this was early morning light, and I can tell you this is my 90 millimeter. I'm a Fuji shooter. This is the Fuji f3. I think it might be the f2. With a 90 millimeter f2 lens, and it's at f2. And so since it's early morning light, my shutter speed is probably, I don't know, 1,000th of a second or something. So, but I shot this at f2 so that I'd have all that fabulous bokeh in the background, or bokeh.
And before we get Tony on, a couple more really quick from the Q&A. Fred said inspiring images, which they are. Bob Coates said oomph indeed.
Yeah.
Michael said, oomph is going to be the word of the day. Love these images. And then Daniel said the black and white picture of the man with the mustache is so powerful. Awesome. Daniel also said that Switzerland is starting to open back up. So good to hear that.
Switzerland.
Who?
Good. All right. Yeah. Thank you. All right. I'm going to stop my
beautiful.
share now. So go back to the screen, and there we go.
Beautiful.
Thank you for letting me.
And by the way, if we run over, as long as you guys are here and as long as Bobbi and Tony are here, if we go a little bit over today, don't worry about it.
I'm enamored by this conversation.
Yeah.
This is the best we've had. Yeah, this is
sorry,
awesome.
Tony. I'm sorry I took some of your time.
Yeah. Oh, please. Are you kidding? Yeah, because I'm not a big fan of yours at all.
I want everybody to know that Bobbi's and Tony's results are all thanks to my tutelage over the years. Never mind. I can't even go there with a straight face.
And Tony has to
Tony,
follow
take
that
it away,
up. Good
buddy.
luck. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't even know what to say. Let me
Bobbi
see what
Lane,
happens
you just flipped me the bird.
No. I did this. I was
pointing. Oh, I did that. Okay.
My face.
Because for a minute there, I was so proud. I was so proud of you that on camera you gave me the bird. All right, Tony, take it away, buddy.
I don't even know what to say. Can you see that okay? Just a little quick title slide there.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, it's coming across. So that you know, some people's screens, depending on the resolution of your screen, you may end up like I'm seeing it with the full Corbell workshops. My laptop is cropped a little bit. Nothing we can do about that, just so that the
we'll just move around and away from it. This is one early morning, just looking at, I think about light and shadow a lot. And this is, I call this picture Retirement Village, where all my Hasselblads are lined up, and different cameras over the years. But the light and shadow got me, and it really does hold true what we learned from Da Vinci, about if you're going to produce depth in a painting, you've got to have direction of light, highlight and shadow. It all has to be there. You've got to have this great direction. And it was just all there. And I just thought, well, that's kind of a fun thing. And I fired off 2 frames of it. And it became my favorite picture for a long time. This is out in our warehouse, our back of our warehouse studio here in Oklahoma. We've got a pretty nice setup with this monster, ridiculously ugly, grungy space in the back where you can shoot in all 4 corners all day long. the light is unbelievable. And we use it a lot. We've shot bands out there, rock and roll bands, musicians, a lot of stuff out there. The front studio we use a lot. This is a fashion shoot that I was doing not too long ago in the front space, which is 18-foot ceilings, about 30 to 40 feet deep with 24-foot width facing north. So we got these great windows. I put this in because I wanted to show you one thing that I have started doing in an interesting way recently. You'll notice I've got a 5-foot Octa, a Profoto Octa box with a light inside the box, but in front of that I have a second light coming from the exact same axis, not axis,
Axes.
like axes, like this. What that does is it allows me the ability to have big, soft, overall pleasing, soft, non-specular shadows and a little hit of a more specular light coming from the exact same position. So I have no competing shadows, if that makes sense. This works great if you're a food photographer because you've got these soft shadows from your tomatoes, you know, in a produce picture. And yet if you've spritzed down your tomatoes with water and glycerin or whatever, now I can get a little hit and spark up a specular highlight with a little bit of that. So it's just a fun little technique that I've been doing for a while now. And you can ratio your power up and down depending on which one you want to have more strength at the time. So it's just a fun thing to show. Here's one, just a 5-foot Octa.
Real quick, can you go back to that other shot?
Sure.
Bob Coates commented, is that called a double key?
I
suppose it could be.
I've never called it anything. Sure, Bob. According to Bob Coates, as of today, on this date in May, during the lockdown, it is now named the Double Key Coates. So there we go. Just a fun little shot. 5-foot Octa with a little highlighter beneath, and then I've got a red light on the gel in the background on A1, and then in her hair I've got 2 1x3 strip lights with red gels, and just try to make it fun. It was a portfolio piece for her. A one-light portrait. This is an old picture, and this is a bad reproduction. It's from 2013 that I shot at Santa Fe Workshops of Aaron. You remember Aaron, Bobby, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. He's
great artist. He's a great artist, and he's always a fabulous subject. And we did a bunch of work with Aaron. And as he was leaving, he stopped me and he said, "I need a headshot. Can you just do something for me really fast?" And I said, "Sure." And I was able to pull this off. And Santa Fe saw it and liked it, and it went in an international ad. So I was thrilled that they picked it up and used it. But it's a one-light portrait.
Didn't we feature that as your picture on Y?
Yeah, we did.
Started Y.
We did, and it's a 3x4 softbox on Profoto D1, and I had feathered the light slightly to my left just to get a little bit of light on the gray sweep behind him. So I used it with one. I did it with one light.
Beautiful.
And I do find that I do that a lot. I find that a lot of my work, I've worked in big studios with big lights and a lot of lights, and I own a lot of lights. But I do find that I'm using less and less. Here's a shot with 2 lights. It's a 5-foot Octa on her face, and it's interestingly enough, it's a 2-foot Octa on the background, laying on the ground, fired up at a gray sweep. So it's just the 2 lights, and I think I can sell it. You don't have to have 5 lights to be able to pull this off. You can do it with 1 or 2 lights. You can make a great picture and buy houses and cars. So.
I remember a famous quote, Tony. It said something to the effect of, "I would have written you a shorter message if I had more time." And I think that's really translatable to the artwork here. That it takes more time and effort to use less equipment to get the same results, but often it's more succinct and more powerful as a result.
Well, that's the strength of it, and so often that I've learned from cinematographers over the years. I follow all the cinematographers, the top 20 cinematographers. I follow everything they do. And they often talk about, it's not about adding more light. It's about taking away more light.
Yep.
And they're absolutely right. There's so much that's taken away that you don't always need. This is in the back in the warehouse. She's a lounge singer and fabulous. and a 5-foot octa up high below and up high to my right. And I'm skimming just a little past her, lighting up the bricks behind her. This was a shot the day I got the GFX 50R Fuji. So
The way you got her tattoos even to pop, contrast wise, just awesome.
I do a lot of I'm pretty good with black and white. I introduced when Nick Software introduced
Silver Effects
Pro, I was the guy that introduced it to the U.S. market, and I've done hundreds of thousands of hours of
still my go-to black and white software.
It's still mine. I use it every day. Another musician locally here in Muskogee, really well-known guy that had a show called Hankering for Hank, and it was a Hank Williams tribute that he did. And this was a photograph that we did of him recently. And it's a 2-light setup. There's a light, it's actually 3. Sorry. The light right of camera, the little skim light lighting up the edge of his hair and under the brim of his hat, and then of course the main light to the far right. But it's on location in a parking garage, and we parked it there because as we were parking the car, I figured out where it was going to go. He had just written a song for his wife called El Camino Katie, and so we had parked the car in the garage, and then I saw that strip of red and white stripe on that post in the background, so we backed it into there just to pick up the color.
That SS also is a rare car, and Fred said, "Love how the guy in the car are so well balanced with light."
Yeah, thanks. Well, that's what it's all about sometimes, is understanding where that balance is. This is another local musician. I photograph a lot of musicians, as you can tell. This is a local guy in Oklahoma standing in front of the Music Hall of Fame. And he looks like it's a early morning sunlit shot, and it is not. This is a B10 on location, just a direct raw head, no diffusion on it whatsoever. This was straight out of camera. This was a pop on TTL out of my camera. That system is so accurate; it's remarkable.
Fabulous.
I will say a couple of things about that. Technology's finally caught up with us, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure if that makes sense or not, but it seems to me that somewhere along the way, we lost technology. It kind of got away from us, and somewhere along the way, recently, it came back to us. So the technology works. So for me, it all kind of makes sense, and the accuracy of what's going on with TTL and high-speed sync and all of that is remarkable. And it's allowing me to be quicker, faster, more efficient with my work. And that's all I can ask for, is being quicker and faster and more efficient. So does that make sense?
Yeah. Is that your last slide?
Yeah, that's it. So
you want to stop your screen sharing really quick.
I would love to. Whoop, there it goes. Here we go. Hang on. It won't let me stop my share.
It's at the top.
Screen sharing. Stop share. Here we go. Sorry.
There we go.
There it is.
Yeah.
So Tony, one quick question. You mentioned about technology, and it no longer, for a while, it's like we were afraid of it. Like, you just want to obfuscate the technology. You don't even want to be looking at it. You don't want to understand it. It's going to be hiding behind the scenes, the era of point and shoot cameras and, cell phone shooting and everything else. But, if you have the knowledge to understand what's going on behind the scenes, I feel like you're right, that it's become much more intuitive in order to take the reins and just say, okay, I know I need this here and that there and this here, and it should all work when I snap my fingers because I know what I'm doing. We're now at that level, I think, where if you understand how these puzzle pieces fit together, you no longer have to go and weld them together. They just fit perfectly, right?
I'll tell you how I've learned to think and operate now. Because of what you just stated, I came up with a little clever kind of a way to say it, which is, I use flash outdoors every time I shoot. I don't do natural light. I just don't do natural light. I can always get a better skin tone, better color, better this, better everything if I can light anything. So I light everything. And what I've come up with is a silly little sentence that says, I expose for the place and light the face. That's it.
That's great.
That works.
It
I
just
like
expose.
that.
I expose for what's there and what I want to present, and then I like the face to match. And almost always, my TTL covers me, carries me, and I don't miss. So,
Yeah.
Question wise, first of all, John said supernatural light, but then, which I love, and I'm going to mention something John also put into the chat in a little bit, but Daniel said, Tony, could you please explain the flash in front of the softbox again? Is there also one in the softbox? Yes, there is.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
could you explain
there
the
is.
concept again?
The concept was I wanted the soft overall feel of the big, large 5-foot octa fairly close to this model. That's the feel that I was wanting to get. But I also wanted to get a little bit more sparkle in her skin, maybe in her sequins in her gown, maybe, or a little bit more snap. In other words, I see people misuse a 4x6 softbox all the time. A 4x6 softbox, everybody's all about it being a big, nice, soft, wonderful window. Yeah, but it can get a little mushy if you overuse it or if you use it too close. So what I wanted was this big, soft, softened look, but I still needed a harder edge to it.
You wanted the specular highlights and the sparkle, right?
I had to, and so if I put that second light in direct axes with the big soft light, I can control it now. I can give it I can be one stop below my softbox.
That's what I was going to ask. What were your ratios? Probably
it can be -1 on people. It's usually about a -1. It doesn't really add a lot to the overall exposure, but it adds a lot to the overall feel of the picture.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Let me hit some of these things in the Q&A really quick before we get too late. Mark said, no lighting conversation is complete without Dean. So we got that one.
Thank you, Mark.
And then Mark also said, great session, very inspirational. So we got that one there. And
Great.
then Will said, we all bow to the lighting god, Tony Corbell. Brilliant and yet simple with the double light setup, which I completely agree, otherwise known as supernatural light.
Bobby taught me everything I know. That's all I can tell you.
And Bob Coates said, I can't leave, but I was planning. Because it's just really, honestly, this is amazing what we're getting into here.
Well, over the years, Bobby and I, it's really funny. Bobby and I haven't known each other that long. We've known of each other for a very long time. I've known of Bobby for 35 years. Yeah. But we didn't meet until about 15 or 20 years ago in New York.
Yeah,
and we crisscrossed. We followed each other all over the country for years. And I knew what she was doing. She knew what I was doing. My students were taking her classes. Her students were taking my classes. And we were speaking the same language, but we never met. And then when we finally met, it was like, oh, yeah, we're best friends now. So
yeah. I mean, we have the Beatle thing, too.
Well, there's that. I'm just saying.
I used to do brunch with the Beatles on the air for years and years.
It is.
Hey, Daniel said, awesome, Tony. Thank you. And Fred said, 2 of my fave photographers.
Fred's a good man. Thank you, Fred.
Will had a question a little while ago. Would love to know what LED lights all of the panelists use. Any particular ones you like more than others? So any comments on LEDs?
Who wants to go first?
I will only say that I don't use any independent LEDs. The only LEDs I use or even have are on the B10s and the B10 pluses in my strobes. I don't use any separate LEDs. I just can't find, and I've tested several on the market. I'm a pretty big fan of what Westcott's done with the Solix and with their Flex Light. But I still find that for me and the bulk of what I do in my world, I have to have strobes. When I do occasionally I need to use a little LED, I'll just use the LEDs that are in the B10s, and they're very bright and controllable. And I can vary their color temperature with my iPhone. So it's a pretty cool thing. So.
Lee and I just last fall bought, they're fairly new, they're called the Nan lights. And we got the Forzas, they're small. They're only about this big, but they have Fresnel. You can get a Fresnel attachment for it. So we got those specifically to do some of the Hurrell stuff, and we did a workshop last fall using them. And so they all have focusing Fresnels on them. They're really not very expensive. They're like amazing. And if you're shooting at ISO 400, you can be hand holding at 125th of a second at like f4. So they're bright enough to be able to do that. And they're really reasonably priced, like with the Fresnel, maybe $400 each, something like that. So
Bobby, Lisa is asking, how do you spell the manufacturer?
Nan, N-A-N.
Lite, Nanlite.
Nanlite.
Wow, Will saw the Beatles in Liverpool. And then Pamela asked, Pamela loved Bobby's photo of the red costume and the effect in the background. Could you give another quick, just helicopter explanation of that, how that was achieved?
That was one of those great big huge LED lights that are very expensive. They're a couple $1,000 with a red gel on it. That is pointing only at the background. It was pointing at the doors, the rolling doors on the loading dock. And I've got the octa on the flash. So the light on the person, it's kind of what Tony just said. Okay, so my exposure is based upon the background light. My shutter speed is based upon the background light, and then I put the light on the person. So she's lit by a strobe, so the light that's on her, it's only strobe. And the light that's on the background, there's no strobe light on the background, that's only continuous light. So you can only pick one f-stop, and of course your f-stop for the strobe, it's not going to control your exposure. So you pick whatever f-stop you want, and then find out what your shutter speed is going to be, or to do that in the reverse engineering, since I know I need to be at a 15th of a second, a 15th or an 8th, then I take my reading off of the background, my available light reading on the background at a 15th of a second, and find out what f-stop I need, and then I adjust the power on the strobe to do that. So the light's on her, she's frozen by the strobe, but when I'm zooming the camera during that exposure, then everything is going to do this. So she's still frozen in the middle, but when you zoom, then the background edges are bleeding through where the strobe light was laid down. So it's kind of like, it's almost like a double exposure, except it's happening at the same time.
And so that people know, Daniel and Will posted the link to that company in the Q&A. Thank you, guys.
Great.
For the person that mentioned they'd seen the Beatles in Liverpool, I had a Liverpool photo workshop this year that I had to cancel during this lockdown. That'll be reposted on my website. And we're going back to Liverpool in May. So sorry.
Hey, and as we, I guess, have to wrap it up, I just want to tag John Cornicello, who just made a comment here. More with Tony and Bobby tomorrow and next Thursday on cornicello.com/photo-QA. And there it is.
John did this great headshot of he and I in his basement. With
fabulous.
This very funky light, and we had a great time doing it together. John's a great man, and he has been so instrumental at Creative Live in so many sessions with so many photographers.
Yeah, so John, hopefully you get a couple more hits tomorrow. And if you're not following John online, you probably should. And while I've got this shared, I want to mention Don's podcast, because Bobby's been mentioning Fresnel lenses. A lot of people say Fresnel. It's actually Fresnel. And it just so happens on the latest episode of Photo Geek Weekly, Don and I talk about a Fresnel lens that a guy built that lets you see behind objects.
Hypercentric photography. And I totally put on my propeller hat for those conversations. It's so much fun when you can muck around with light and make magic tricks from physics.
Very unique.
And that's why we call you the mad scientist. Because it fits.
He has his propeller hat next to him, I guarantee it.
Yeah. It's,
all right, here comes.
Almost within reach. I can't quite reach it right now.
I want him to send me that Pro Pack of E100 film in the background.
Yeah, I could do that, Tony. Yeah.
I recognize that box.
There you go. And there's my propeller hat for you.
All right, there it is. Hey, I want to thank you guys.
Can I say one more thing, Skip?
Of course you can.
I just want to say that, in trying to keep with everything being positive during this time and staying active, on my Facebook page, just go to Bobby Lane. Every day I put up a challenge where I put up an idea or concept or a word, and I put up a couple pictures, and I ask people to post images. And I've been doing this, I think it's like 50 days now that I've done it every single day. And it's helping people to stay involved and active and creative and fun. And it's really a great thing. So just go take a look at it. And the last thing I want to say is that Lee and I have an education website that's called Bobbi and Lee's photoadventures.com. So you can always, write to me at bobby@bobbylane.com, but I'm bobbylane.com, but the Bobbi and Lee's Photo Adventures is where we have all of our educational stuff, online stuff, hopefully travel tours again, anything else that's happening. So just
And Lee,
how to reach me.
and Lee is also doing, is it weekly, a Photoshop rant?
Photoshop rant.
Photoshop rant.
Yeah, and if you
So-
go to that website, you can sign up for his newsletter, and he'll give you free stuff, and then you'll get the newsletter that links you to all the other things. So.
And if you play your cards right, you'll get Bobby's gluten-free chocolate chip cookie recipe.
Ooh.
And there's no telling what you'll get these days out of that house. Hey, I want to thank you guys for doing this today, and as always, to Steve and Shamara and Don co-hosting and being part of this, and especially Steve, who's helping me get my wings on Zoom.
Learning to fly.
I'm not quite there yet. Hey, everybody out there, stay safe, stay healthy, stay positive, and I always quote the guy from Hill Street Blues, be careful out there. That's it, everybody. And we'll be back next Wednesday, 2:00. Not sure who's going to be on yet, but this was a great program today.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone.
Peace and love.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to meet
everyone.
both of you. Shamira,
Thank
wonderful
you.
to see you. Don and Skip, wonderful to see you as well. And to everybody in the Q&A, thank you very much.
And we're going to
Thank you
hit
all.
the button right there.